Thank you, Laura, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak here tonight. I have an interesting statistic for you. Roughly 1 in 4 Americans will have a disability at some point during their working lives. So if we look around, there's not that many of us here today, but a significant portion of us will at some point in our working lives have a disability, and we may need accommodation for that disability. An interesting thing about disability as a protected characteristic, for me, I think it's extremely interesting that anyone at any moment with no notice whatsoever can become disabled and enter into that protected group. I like to, when I'm giving training for the employees that I work with, I give a cheerful little aside. Any one of us could walk out of here tonight and get hit by a bus, and suddenly we would be disabled and we might need accommodation in our day-to-day lives, in our work. So it's something that clearly could be relevant to absolutely anyone in this room, and is extremely relevant to me in the work that I do. Unfortunately, as many of you are already aware, employment with people with disabilities is suffering. People with disabilities are underemployed and unemployed at much higher rates than people without disabilities, than the American population as a whole. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, in 2017, only 17.9% of people who have disabilities were actively engaged in the workforce. And that's compared to 65% of people overall. So 17.9 versus 65%. And we've heard a lot over the past few years about how the unemployment rate in general is approaching all-time lows. Most people who want a job can find a job. There are no issues with finding a job. Well, unfortunately, that doesn't necessarily hold true for people with disabilities. The unemployment rate, i.e. people who want to find a job and are unable to do so, for people with disabilities, that unemployment rate is 10.5%. And that's as compared to 4.6% for people without disabilities. These higher rates of unemployment or underemployment for people with disabilities hold true at all levels of educational attainment. For example, only 26.2% of people who have a disability and who hold a bachelor's degree or higher are employed. And you can compare that with the population of undisabled, non-disabled Americans, and 75.6% of Americans who have a bachelor's degree or higher and who are not disabled are employed. So clearly there is a problem in how we're utilizing the available workforce. But what can we do to motivate employers to help change that? Well, we need to sell employment of people with disabilities as a sound business decision. One extremely important tool that we can use to sell employment of people with disabilities, increasing the pool from which we are drawing our employees, our workforce, is going to increase the number of qualified candidates that any employer is evaluating when they're looking to fill a position. As I mentioned, unemployment at this stage is reaching near all-time lows. And so when employers are currently looking to fill positions, the market is very limited. But that's because they're not considering all of the available workforce who have the abilities to perform the position. It is very important that we make employers understand that increasing the pool of applicants is going to increase the number of qualified candidates that they're receiving. Second, employing people with disabilities makes a lot of financial sense for employers. Accommodations are often no cost at all. We can make adjustments to things like an employee's work schedule or shift. For example, the uniforms that an employee might need to wear, we can make some adjustments to that if that's what's necessary. Those things don't cost employers any money at all. And when the accommodation does cost money, it's often very low cost. Employers are surprised to find sometimes that the average accommodation costs under $500. For every dollar that is spent on accommodating an employee who has a disability, the employer receives an average of $26 in returns. So financially, there are a lot of incentives, or there should be a lot of incentives for employers to make these accommodations. Accommodating employees who have disabilities can result in increased productivity, performance, and profits for the employer. Accommodating an employee whose performance is suffering because they have a disability and it's impairing some aspect of their ability to perform the job, that's going to enable that employee to then perform that job function. That's going to directly improve that employee's work performance and their productivity. Studies have shown that employees who have disabilities generally have productivity rates that are equal to or higher than employees who don't have disabilities. In fact, employees who have disabilities are often very grateful to have a job because they understand that the job market is not necessarily friendly to them. And so when they're given the opportunity, they want to demonstrate that they can perform the work. The studies have shown that people who have disabilities actually have lower rates of unscheduled absences than people without disabilities. Employees who have disabilities are often better at engaging in teamwork because they're used to working collaboratively to solve problems or to achieve goals. And people who have disabilities may have developed unique skills and abilities in other areas to compensate for the challenges that they're facing in day-to-day life, or as a result of the way that their brains function. They may have knowledge of assistive technologies that can help your organization to innovate as you're trying to adapt and change and face interesting new problems that you have. They may have different ways of thinking about those problems. And increased diversity and inclusion in an organization can lead to higher quality decision making and higher profits. There have been multiple studies that have shown that increasing the diversity will actually benefit the organization financially. Employing people with disabilities can reduce turnover. Turnover can be a huge, huge expense for employers. And so when we look at that reduction in turnover, well, to begin with, employees who have disabilities are actually shown to have higher retention rates than employees who don't have disabilities. Often they're seeking stable and reliable work because, as we mentioned, they know that the job market may not be friendly to them. They may need the health insurance that a job offers, and so they're willing to do what it takes to show up every day and continue receiving those job benefits. And they're going to do what needs to be done in order to keep the job once they have it. In addition, accommodating the employees that you already have once they become disabled is going to save you on the cost of recruiting and training new employees. So again, reduces turnover. And employing individuals with disabilities can also save an employer on the cost of workers' compensation claims. For one thing, employees with disabilities actually have lower rates of filing workers' compensation claims than non-disabled employees. And second, when employees become disabled through an on-the-job injury, accommodating the employee, offering them some adjustment to the way that they're performing the work, can actually allow them to come back and safely return to performing the work that they were doing earlier than they might otherwise have done. So rather than the employer paying on workers' comp claims or paying on duty disability, they're now paying the employee to come in and do the work that they were doing before. Finally, it makes good business sense to employ individuals who have disabilities because it can improve employee satisfaction. Employees throughout the organization will appreciate knowing that their employer will support their needs should they have a need for accommodation in the future. And the bottom line for employers is often, well, what will my customers think? Well, employing people with disabilities will actually improve customer satisfaction. Customers in today's economy want to see a commitment to diversity from the companies that they do business with. In fact, one national study showed that 92% of consumer participants said they felt more favorably towards companies that hire people with disabilities. And 87% said they would prefer to give their business to companies that hire people who have disabilities. Beyond just the optics of hiring people with disabilities, however, those employees can improve the service that employers are providing to their customers. Employees with disabilities are bringing their unique experiences and understanding to the work that they're doing for your organization, and will provide valuable perspectives about how you can serve diverse populations. So as it relates to job applicants and employees with learning disabilities, what are some of the things that employers can be doing to improve recruitment and accessibility for this group? First, employers should be offering accommodations that assist potential candidates with the application process. These accommodations should not be thought of as giving a candidate an unfair advantage, but rather as leveling the playing field for candidates whose brains function in different ways, giving them the opportunity to demonstrate their qualifications for the job. An individual with a learning disability may require assistance in completing the job application. The employer can easily obtain the information that's necessary just by having a conversation with the employee and completing the application for them with the information that they're provided. In an interview, the candidate may need additional time to process the questions that are being asked and to compose their responses. Employers should be understanding of requests to repeat questions or of the increased response time that may be necessary, and they should not count it against the candidate if processing speed is not the purpose for which they're evaluating the candidate. People with learning disabilities may underperform on tests for reasons that have nothing to do with their ultimate ability to perform the job-related tasks. So for jobs that require an entry exam, there are many potential accommodations that can help provide candidates with learning disabilities an equal chance to compete for the position. For example, many of the things that we do at the City of Chicago, when we have a tested position, we can provide a distraction-free test environment. We can provide the candidate with additional time to take the test. In fact, this one is very interesting to me. This is a key way to account for the differences in the way that the brains of people who have dyslexia function can be to give them additional time. Studies have shown that when people with dyslexia are provided with additional time to complete a test, their scores increase substantially. However, when people without dyslexia are given additional time, their scores improve only marginally. This demonstrates that we're not providing dyslexic candidates with an unfair advantage. We're merely providing them with the tools to compete on equal footing. Another test accommodation that we can sometimes offer is the ability to use a calculator if one of the skills that we're testing is not the ability to perform mathematical calculations. Or we can provide a dyslexic candidate with a reader for the test, so someone who will read the questions for them and then they fill out the responses. On the job, employees with learning disabilities may have a range of needs that can be easily accommodated at little or no cost to the employer. For example, some employees who have learning differences may need a reduced distraction work environment. Well, we can easily provide that by giving them an office or extending the cubicle walls, or even something so simple as allowing them to use a white noise machine or headphones with white noise music playing through. Employees with learning disabilities may also have difficulty processing information that they hear, so we can assist them by allowing them to record meetings and conversations for later playback. That way they can access the information again when they need to recall what was said. Employees with dyslexia often tell us that they're having difficulty processing textual information. We can easily accommodate them with minor changes to the way that we provide that information. For example, we can give them verbal instructions as opposed to written. When we must provide them with written information, we can make sure that it's double-spaced in clear, easy-to-read fonts for written materials. We can eliminate visual distractions on the page, like photos or graphics. We can adjust the color scheme or the default fonts on their computer display. The advances in technology have made it very easy for us to find software that perform many different functions for the employees, like screen reading, on-screen reading rulers, or text highlighting or filters. We can even purchase things like reading pens that will scan and read back the printed material. We can, for employees who need additional time to process the written material that they're reading, we can give them those materials in advance of any training. And we can give them additional time to perform tasks that involve reading. Employees with dyslexia may struggle with producing written work product. Well, we can assist them by giving them the ability to use a computer or tablet for note-taking. We can give them assistance with proofreading. Again, the software has given us some amazing tools such as voice-to-text dictation or word prediction for typing. And we can, again, give them additional time for any activities or job skills that require them to do any writing. We can provide additional time for anyone who has a learning disability that makes it difficult for them to learn new tasks. Finally, because people with learning differences sometimes have difficulty with organizing and sort of compiling the information that they're receiving, we can offer assistance with that organization, such as color-coding materials, preparing task lists for the employee or assisting them with preparing those task lists, setting automated reminders, and scheduling check-in meetings with the employee's supervisor. So once an employer knows that the employee has a learning disability, what should they do? Well, if the employee has indicated to the employer that they have a if they have indicated that they have a disability that impacts their ability to perform some aspect of their job.
I'm gonna shut it off.
If the employee has indicated to the employer that they have some sort of physical or mental condition that impacts their ability to perform the job, that begins what we refer to in our business as the interactive process. The employer is then obligated. Let's start a conversation with the employee. Find out from the employee exactly what challenges they're facing in performing their work. The employee is often the one who's in the best position to know what sorts of things have been effective in the past, what sorts of things do they think might work this time. And in our organization, I coordinate that process for all of our departments, and it's often very rewarding because as the supervisors are learning more about the challenges that the employee is facing, they're often understanding why there have been issues in the past, why there may have been some performance issue that they were attributing to a lack of dedication on the employee's part, or just in general that the employee wasn't very good at their job. And instead they find out that no, this person just functions differently and they need some way, some tool that's going to assist them to do the job in a way that maybe the other employees don't. But once they have that tool, they're able to perform. Often they can exceed the performance of employees without disabilities. So I greatly appreciate the opportunity to speak a little bit about what I do, and thank you very much.